Hello, this is Miss Clark Reads to You, and today we are reading Chapter 10 in Deathwatch by Rob White. We will be taking some notes on the interesting facts. We're going to probably draw an image as to where Ben is and what he's up to, and then we'll identify the mood and the tone, and we'll give the chapter a title. There were voices in the wind. Off and on all night Ben had listened to them, the whispering, the faint dry laughter, the chattering that sometimes sounded insane. As a little boy he had heard these wind voices, and they had scared him, but his father had told him that the desert had to talk at night, that it was so silent during the day, it just had to break out in all this talk at night. Ben had never been afraid of the voices after that. He had slept all night, guarded against Madec by the birds that had come at sunset to roost at the mouth of the tunnel. Every time Ben moved in his sleep, they fluttered and cried out, hustling away from him. At dawn, he had shot 6 birds, using only pebbles in the slingshot, saving the buckshot for a time when he might need the greater velocity and greater accuracy. He had plucked and cleaned them more efficiently, and he had the others, and now they were lying on a smooth, clean rock, the sun already beginning to cook them. Using water from the puddle, he had cleaned all the wounds he could reach and was pleased to see how fast they were healing. He had inspected his slingshot, examining the rubber tubes carefully to see that they were not beginning to break or wear at any place. His beard was now 6 days old, for he had made it a practice not to shave during long trips in the desert. A beard helped protect his face from the sun. When he looked at himself in the surface of the water, his beard was very black and thick and gave him a strange, satanic look. He looked dangerous. So one of the things that we want to think about here is how much Ben has changed since he first set off in the desert with Madec. And this paragraph on 116, the second indented paragraph, identifies his difference in his looks. The beard, black and thick, gave him a strange, satanic look. He looked dangerous. Even if he's not a dangerous person, he looks at this point as though he could be. Ben had a pleasant sense of well-being as he sat down in the tunnel out of reach of Madec's gun and started practicing with the slingshot. Now here is a behavioral difference. Up until this point, he was on edge. He was fighting the elements of the desert to get to this tunnel or this corridor, and now he has a sense of well-being, a sense of calm. His wounds only hurt when he moved carelessly. His arm only ached a little, and although he was hungry, he was content to wait until the carcasses became more appetizing. Again, another behavioral change. He's not desperate for food. He's not desperate for water. He was getting so good with the slingshot that he could hit within an inch of where he aimed at 30 feet. At 15 feet, he was accurate even with a stone. Again, before he had got into the tunnel, he hadn't practiced with the slingshot. Now he is precise in the way he is able to aim and hit something. Accuracy. A 9-inch whiptail lizard came into view, and Ben threw a pebble at it to get it moving, and then nailed it on the run at 20 feet. It added to his cooking birds, and then he stopped for a moment and looked through his peek hole at Madec. The man had pitched camp at the foot of the butte, getting the jeep in close to the breccia. He had parked facing the butte and had put up the tent behind the jeep. The water cans were in under the awning of the tent, lined up in a neat row in the shade. So I'm thinking that Ben's up on the butte. Oop, this one doesn't work. I do have one that works. Oh, this is where we're going to draw our picture. Okay, so here's the butte right here. Okay, and there's that little ledge, and the butte continues. This is where the tunnel is. This is where Ben is hiding. This is where the funnel is, right here, okay? Right, this is the tunnel or the corridor. Okay, this is where Ben is inside here. Okay, here's our lake. Okay, this is where he's drying his birds out in the sun. The view continues up. Okay, I'm not sure how many feet. This is not a to scale drawing. And then here's Madec down here with the Jeep, and the tent, okay, is set up right here. Okay, this is where Madec sleeps, and it says the water cans were in under the awning of the tent, lined up in a neat row in the shade. So the water cans are inside this tent, all lined up. Okay? All right. So tent and water cans. All right. Madec was doing something around behind the Jeep. Ben could see his shadow moving. So Ben can see through the peepholes. Remember there's these peepholes in here, like cottage, like cheese. Ben can see Madec doing something over here. Here's Madec's cap, because he can see a shadow. He sat down again and fitted the slingshot back into his hand. He knew that it was foolish to imagine that he was safe just because he had food and water and Madec could not shoot him. Madec would change that. All right, so that's a fact. That's a fact. Ben knows it's foolish to think he's safe. He was locked to that man down on the desert. They were chained together. Perhaps a different man would have left the desert by now, sure that Ben could not make it out. But Madec would not do that. He would stay until he saw that his plan had been worked out to the last detail. Madec would not leave him here alive. As Ben sat going over in his mind what had happened since the first roar of that .358, a thought formed and became clearer and clearer until he realized that it was the only thing he could do. The chain between them was hundreds of feet long now, stretching from high on the butte, down the steep side, across the breccia and the smoother, sandier desert, and over to the Jeep, locking at last to Madec. Okay, so we have this symbol that we talked about earlier of the chain. Okay, it's not a literal chain, it is a figurative chain, and it is, let me see if I can do it in a different color. So he refers to it, oh, that one's not working either. I know that the blue was working. Okay, sorry about that with my technical difficulties. So there's this chain, this symbolic chain, linking these two men together, okay? For me to live, Ben thought, that chain must be drawn shorter. It must be drawn in link by link until he and I are face to face. And somehow, when we do come face to face, he must be as naked as I am. Now that would also be a symbolic naked. In other words, vulnerable. I cannot let Madec come to me, Ben thought. I cannot let him choose his place and his time and his method of coming. I must either go to him or I must pull him to me. Ben laid aside the slingshot and went over to the hole in the wall. Madec was walking toward the butte. He had the big gun slung over one shoulder and the coil of tow rope over the other, and was carrying the heavy canvas bag in which Ben stowed tools and gear. He's coming to me, Ben thought, coming at his choice of place and time and method. Madec disappeared from view as he moved in close to the wall of the butte. Ben went on to the end of the tunnel and waited there, not exposing himself. The sound was clear but faint. Listening to it, he could almost see what Madec was doing down there. In the canvas bag, there was a geological hammer with a flat peen on one end and a long rock-breaking spike on the other. Madec was down there at the foot of the butte, cutting a stairway up the side of it. The sound ceased for a moment, and then a new sound came up, clear and almost musical, the sound of metal hammering metal. Now he was driving a piton into a crack in the rock. For a moment, Ben wondered what Madec was using for a piton. Then he thought of the long steel pegs he carried in case he had to pitch a tent in stony ground with a high wind. And with the rope secured to the tent pegs driven into the face of the wall, and with handholds and footholds hacked out of the wall, Madec was starting to climb the butte. So here's Madec down here. He's using the tools inside Ben's backpack to make a stairway up to this ledge. He knows Ben's in there. So Madec makes a stairway, and he's using tent pegs as a piton. I'm going to write that. Tent pegs. We might want to look up this word too at some point so we can have a visual as to what that would look like if we are rock climbers. At last the ledge became although he knew that Madec probably could not see him, Ben took no chances as he left the tunnel and went on the wide ledge, staying low against the far side, which rose in a smooth wall. He hurried along, noticing as he went how the ledge not only slanted upward, but was narrowing. So that's why I made this ledge slant upward, and it narrows, okay? It's thinner and thinner and thinner. The word is narrows. So there's no escape, pretty much. That's why Ben is studying. At last the ledge became so narrow that he could not walk on it, and a few feet farther on fared back into the escarpment. The escarpment was a wall of smooth stone inclined outward. This leaning wall towered above him for more than 50 feet and formed, it appeared, the top of the butte. So and it's escarpment, I believe, and we can also look up that word, is an overhang. So the butte has an overhang, so Ben can't get up to the top of the butte, okay, because it's almost like there's this curve. So we want to look up escarpment too. Okay. About 20 feet beyond where he stood, but above him, was another ledge, wide and slanting upward, an easy path to the top of the butte. No force in the world would hold him against that leaning wall long enough to cross those 20 feet up to the wide avenue of stone going to the top. I love how he calls it a wide avenue. Nor was there any way a naked man with no tools could scale the escarpment. He was confined to this narrow ledge and the tunnel. He was imprisoned here, and Madec knew that. Ben could now see exactly what Madec was planning and where Madec was. Ben remembered there was a smooth, unclimbable wall from the breccia to a ledge about 30 feet up. Ben had studied this place longingly, for once on that high ledge it had looked to him as though the rest of the way to the loop to the top would be no more than a stiff walk. But without tools and rope, he hadn't been able to conquer the first smooth vertical obstacle. Madec had everything he needed. Ben studied the stone butte from where Madec would start on the first ledge to where he would end at the top. Wherever Madec would be in sight would be out of range of the slingshot. And at those same places, Ben would be an easy target for the gun. He realized slowly and bitterly that he could not stop Madec from climbing. He could not even harass him and slow him down. I'm going to stop there. When I pick up on 11, I will finish reading. Thank you for joining me, and I look forward to reading to you again.